Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and today we're having a conversation about astrology, the new age of Aquarius, and what it means in the context of the coronavirus. And with me is a dear friend of mine from AstrologerCoach.com. Her name is Sonja Francis. How are you, Sonja? How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Jean-Claude. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm excited to be talking to you today.
Well, it's been a long time. I think the last time we spoke was 4 or 5 years ago, and you've moved to, oh, I see your cat in the background. Hello.
Yeah, there's my cat. Yeah, that's his spot back there. So
Is that it? Yeah.
see him more often, probably.
I got to tell you this for the folks out there. The first time I had Sonja read my chart, she told me, you're an Aries, right? I'm like, no, I'm Pisces. So I had gone through my whole life thinking I was Pisces, and it was Sonja who taught me how to really look at the exact date, the time, and where I was born to get that nailed down. And so I thought that was fascinating to change my whole life view. But
right, all of a sudden you're an Aries and you think you're a Pisces.
Right.
But that's very different. That's very different.
Yeah, exactly. So
Uh-huh.
guys, I wanted to have this conversation with Sonja today because there's a lot of alignments happening right now that are specifically impacting what we see here on the ground. So there's that saying, as above, so below. And so we want to have an adult conversation today about how all that is affecting us at a core level. And so we can get a little bit more of an understanding, maybe deep down as intuition, as deep knowing, as opposed to maybe looking outside on the 6 o'clock news, where we see a lot of this propaganda and political grandstanding and all that. So I was hoping to have a nice conversation today with Sonja and hoping that she could guide us through not only what's happened leading up to today, but where we are maybe 3 months, 6 months, or a year down the road. So to help you plan and make the right decisions for yourself and for your family. So I guess we can start there, Sonja. If you can tell the audience a little bit who don't know you, how did how did universe conspire to bring you to astrology? And I say that tongue in cheek because obviously there's a lot of energy.
Obviously, there was a conspiration.
Right.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it was like a divine intervention, I think, in my mind, because I was 19 years old or young, and I was on my way to Australia with a friend of mine, and she was given a book to read for the flight because it's a long flight. I was going from Vienna to Sydney, and it's a long flight, and so she had this book that was given to her, and I asked her if I could read it on the flight because she didn't want to read it really. It was a book about Buddhism. And so I read the book, and in the book, there was a passage that talked about astrology, and it said, as above, so below, and how we choose our coming into the world, like as spirits, and how, that particular time and place creates sort of like the seed for our life potential and, what we're here to do, basically. And it all just kind of made sense to me. I don't know, at the time I read it and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. I really need to read more about astrology, like on a deeper level. Because I knew about horoscopes and, signs and all that I knew already, but it didn't mean anything to me. I thought it was a little bit superficial and seemed silly to me, really. But when I read that book, it took it to a deeper level for me, and that really was the moment. That was my initiation moment with astrology in a sense, and then it just went from there, and 25 years later, here we are.
And have you found a big change in the industry in those last 20 years? And if so, like how like what was the impact?
Absolutely, yeah. I would say that when I first started studying astrology, it was definitely a fringe thing. It was definitely more like an esoteric thing that only certain people would engage in, or certain people would listen to or do. The horoscopes and the stuff in the newspaper and in the magazines, that was more like an entertainment thing for people. So people would engage in that way. But on a deeper level, like really reading a chart and creating a chart for a person, that was something that not many people were interested in, I think. There were definitely certain people that were, but it was kind of like, a little bit like looking at like palm reading, or like a psychic, or it was on that same level, right? And I think over the last 10 years, in particular, I think that I've felt a really big shift with astrology. You know, the last 10 years has definitely been a much more greater curiosity about it, much more wanting to understand ourselves as individuals and as people. And I think astrology is such a wonderful tool for that, you know, because it can really help us understand ourselves better, the energies around us, what's occurring, you know, and how we can align ourselves with that in a way that feels healthy and empowering and good to us, you know.
Right. I found the first time you did my reading and going through the details with you and understanding how I can use the data you were giving me to plot kind of my life, both in the business aspects and also the personal aspects. And I guess that's where you came up with Astrologer Coach, because you're a coach as much as you are a palm reader or a stars reader, right? So
well, I'm also trained as a life coach, right? So I do life coaching as well as astrology. And of course, the two fields kind of merge in with each other when I do a reading sometimes. But I do also have separate just coaching sessions where I just coach people. So I have a coaching technique that I do. So there's sort of like a connecting the two, because I never thought that I would actually be able to make money with astrology. It was just a hobby that I had and a passion that I had. And so I became a life coach to do that because I wanted to help people. And somebody said to me, a friend of mine, she was like, you have to do something with astrology. I want you to create a website. and I was like, well, but I don't know what I'm going to do with just astrology. Because at the time, that was in 2010. And at the time, astrology wasn't really that big on the horizon yet. People weren't really engaging with astrology that much. So I didn't think it was going to be worth my while, you know? And she was like, well, why don't you combine your life coaching with astrology and see what that does for people, how that could be helpful for people. And I like that idea, and that's what I did, and that's why Astrologer Coach.
Awesome. So for people on YouTube, you can pause the video here if you want and get into YouTube and type in Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. You'll find her YouTube channel, and the website is astrologercoach.com, and that's where you can see the different services and the booking request forms and all that. Now, going back to what you just said about the timing in 2010 versus today, of course, we are entering the age of Aquarius. We have this huge crisis planetary-wide right now that's changed really the mindset of people. They've just suddenly got off that hamster wheel and they're ready to think and to absorb data. So you're going to hit your stride like never before, because people are hungry for all of this information that is not 6 o'clock news. We want to go within now. We want to understand things. And maybe that's a good segue to start into how you see, and I'm not sure how you want to time it, but you feel free to put the information where you are. But how did we get to where we are now? Let's start there. As we were leading up to the Age of Aquarius and this huge transformation, let's maybe bring people up to speed to that, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So one thing that's important to understand with astrology is that astrology happens in cycles, right? The planetary cycles that happen, they reflect back what we're currently experiencing internally and as a collective. And for example, the Age of Aquarius, that's a very, very long cycle. That's like a 2,000-year cycle. And so we're actually going to be entering the Age of Aquarius in 2065. So we're because it's such a long cycle, we're actually like this close, right? We're so close to entering the Age of Aquarius. We're not there yet, but we're definitely, what's happening in 2020 is a huge seeding. We're seeding so much this year because there's so many cycles that are freshly beginning in 2020. There is a Saturn-Pluto cycle that began on January 12th. There is a Jupiter-Pluto cycle that's happening 3 times this year. One that just happened in April, the second one in June, a third one in November. These cycles start a 13-year cycle. Then the Saturn-Pluto cycle that happened in January started a 34-year cycle. And then there's another cycle at the end of the year with Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, which will start a 20-year cycle. But it's also part of a larger 200-year cycle because it's happening in the air sign in Aquarius. And previously, the last 200 years, it's always been in an earth sign. So we're really starting so many new cycles in 2020. And this is why this year is so important and such a seeding ground for new things to sprout and to happen. We're not going to experience immediate shifts this year. It's not possible because there's so much that needs shifting that it's a process. And we have to remember that, you know, what's happening with the coronavirus is something it's literally like a reset, right? Just like you could think of war times as reset, right? Like when the First World War happened in Europe or the Second World War happened in Europe, it was like a reset time for something new for the evolution of mankind to take place. Right after the First World War, for example, you know, women got the vote in England, and there were things that happened that were really revolutionary and evolutionary for humankind. The same happened after the Second World War. And the way I look at it with this coronavirus, not that the coronavirus is a war that's taking place, but it's another form of interruption, because a war is an interruption, right? And the coronavirus is interrupting our day-to-day normalcy and the way we live our lives. And this interruption causes each one of us to stop and to, first of all, question, you know, who am I? Why am I here? And how do I want to move forward? Or what does this mean for me? Right? We're looking at the bigger answers. And the way the planets are currently aligned, they are inviting us to ask the bigger questions. It's no longer about, you know, like, do I get my pension or do I get my paycheck at the end of the month? It's really about what are the bigger questions here? Where are we heading, all of us, collectively speaking? But also, where am I heading individually speaking, and in what ways can I make a difference in the collective? Right. So all of this is sort of like, there's like a seeding that's happening with these cycles that are taking place in 2020. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And you're dovetailing into the reason why I started these video channel, but not the channel, but the series itself, the Chaga Gangsters. It was an empowerment series to get people to have those inner dialogues and those questions about what really is going on, where we're going, where we're coming from, and all this. And I find that as people are going through some of the interviews, I get a lot of comments saying, oh, thank you, that helped me out. And, oh, I'm not afraid anymore. And that's the big thing here. I'd like to touch on that with you. There's a lot of fear surrounding change in normal times. But right now, right. And right now it's through the roof, right? You see people with, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, walking on the streets, some have shell shock and all that. So let's talk about, maybe before we go forward a little bit, you describing now how the alignments are pushing us into another big cycle, and there's a lot of new cycles starting. But I would assume that also means that a lot of old cycles are disintegrating or ending.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that does cause fear. But let's talk about how you go from fear to power, right? What kind of advice you would have for people to look at this in the bigger picture, to see those changes as opportunities as opposed to as being locked in fear and unable to move. I really want to focus on that with you today.
Well, one thing that I find really important to understand is that there's a lot of things that we can do individually speaking that we do have control over and that are empowering. And they may not be huge things, not for all of us, but it is important to focus on what you do have influence over, rather than focusing on the things that you don't have influence over. And this is where this, this Jupiter-Pluto and this Saturn-Pluto conjunction Capricorn is very much about self-responsibility and taking back our authority, right? It's inviting us to step into our own authority and to be responsible for who we are, how we show up in the world, and what it is that we're building and wanting to leave behind. And this means that you need to focus on what you have influence over and control over, rather than on the things that take you away from that. And so one of the things that I always suggest to my clients and also talk about in my own videos a lot is, make sure that you have a daily routine or that you have a way to focus on things that you feel good about, right? One of the things that I recommend highly is to stay away from negativity and from the news. And the reason why I say that is not because I don't want people to be informed. I want people to be informed, but I want people to be informed correctly. And the news or the mainstream media doesn't necessarily provide that service. And so it's very important for us to recognize, what do we give power to, right? Because the things that we give power to, if that's something that feeds negativity or that feeds fear, then I am responsible for my own fear, and I'm responsible for how things make me feel, because I'm giving that power. And the power that you give things is what you get in return. So we need to be very conscious and very clear about where we give our attention or our power to. And so one of the things I recommend is stay away from anything that creates negativity or fear within your own energy body. Right. And focus on the things that feel empowering to you, that are heart-centered and love-based, and things where you know that you can make a difference. And even if it's just in a small way, even if it's just like sending a smile to somebody, or sending a little sentence via email or via social media to somebody to help somebody get through a difficult time. If it is that you buy groceries for someone who can't do that for themselves right now. Right. If it is that you self-soothe and you take care of yourself, you snuggle with your pets, you make sure that you're taken care of, that you're healthy, you take your vitamins, you do your exercise, you do your meditation, you do things that you have control over. And the rest is a matter of trust. And this is what's difficult. It's difficult to be trusting in times like these, because there's so much uncertainty and there's so much we don't know. And I come to that as well, why we don't know. Remind me of that. Okay. But there's so much we don't know right now that we don't have all the facts about yet, that is difficult to kind of trust the process. But that is really essential. It is essential that we understand that there's something larger at play here. There's a bigger thing at play here. It's not about our president. It's not about the media, or it's not about, there's something way, way bigger than that. It's a transformation that we're undergoing. And it's a process where we're each individually and collectively growing to a whole new level of interacting with each other, with the world, with ourselves. And so this is important that we understand that there's something much larger at play. And once you can accept that, right? Once you can accept there's something bigger at play, you can start to breathe a little bit easier, because you can say, oh, this is all perfect the way it is. It's meant to happen this way. Right. And one thing that I also want to say is that people that are currently experiencing physical issues because of the coronavirus, people that are dying because of the coronavirus, I want to say that, yes, this is really painful. It's painful for people to experience it. It's painful for people to watch it happen and to be part of that, if it's a family member or a good friend. But I also want people to understand that every single individual chooses how they exit. Right. This is not, nobody is being forced to die. Nobody's being forced to exit this human life at any point. This is a choice. And it may not always be a conscious choice, but on a soul level, each person chooses to leave when they're ready. And the reasons why they're ready to leave may be a lot of different reasons. They might be ready because they've already lived long enough. They've done everything they needed to do. Or they are leaving because they want to come back at a different point in time where they can make a bigger difference than they're currently able to make in this particular body and persona. Or they're leaving because they want to be of service from the outside in. They don't want to be in human form anymore, right? So there are many reasons why people choose to leave the planet right now, and it's important to trust the bigger meaning around all of this.
I'm getting goosebumps. So for the audience out there, I mean, Sonja has just laid it out. I recommend you just rewind 5 minutes and listen to that one more time.
One more time.
One more time, because it's so powerful and so bang on. And if you settle into that and you center yourself with that energy and that frequency that Sonja was just transmitting, you're going to see that fear level go way, way down. That whole understanding that she's describing about us being eternal souls coming in here very temporarily to do a little bit of a small mission in the overall scheme of things in this little meat suit is infinitesimally small compared to the bigger picture. And once you put your head around that, it kind of relieves a lot of the stress. And you kind of also understand things that right now are hard to understand. You're seeing suffering and all that. And I know it's hard to make that connection, but there is a bigger picture, and there is such a thing as soul contracts and karma and all these things that are playing out on the big scale. Now, Sandra, you touched something, and I'm trying to navigate here with the audience, because I found in doing these video series that a lot of people are just emailing me and texting me like, JC, I don't know what the fuck's going on. One media saying this, they're saying that. It's all against Trump. It's the white hats, the good guys.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes.
Right. And so there's a lot of confusion right now. And I was hoping that you can give us some insight as to maybe what alignments are coming up that might help humanity get through that fog of war. I've been calling it the fog of war.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
And
how go ahead.
Yeah. So what I want to say about that is that it's so, if you know astrology, it's just so incredibly orchestrated the way things are happening right now. Because, we had Mercury in Pisces since February 16. Actually, not since February 2nd. And it's been in Pisces, and it still is in Pisces until tomorrow. Tomorrow is April 11th, right? And so this phase of Pisces, it was in Pisces for such a long time, and it's a very unusually long time, because normally this planet is only in one sign for 6 weeks. But this has been in Pisces for about 3 months, right? Or a little bit over 3 months, because it went retrograde and then went direct again. So it's been in this sign for much longer than normal. And Pisces is the energy of the heart. It's the energy of imagination. It's the energy of creativity and universal love. It's connecting us to each other. However, what it isn't the energy of facts. It has nothing to do with facts. So Mercury in Pisces creates confusion because it wants us to go inward. It wants us to connect to our heart center. It doesn't want us to be connected to the mind. It doesn't want us to problem solve. It doesn't want us to get into a rational place. Pisces is irrational. It's creative. Anything that's creative requires chaos. Chaos is required in order to create. And so that's why also you will see on Facebook and on Instagram and on the social media, you will see so many people posting very creative ideas and very creative things that are emerging out of this time of like being quarantined, because the mind is very imaginative right now. Now, the good news is that we're through this imagination, through this heart-centeredness, we've been able to really be very connected to humanity, and we've been able to really, really work together in this crisis, right? The bad news about it is that there has been a lot of confusion. The facts are not clear. There's no clarity around this virus. There's no what is really going on. How are we really going to solve this? But the good news is that April 11th is tomorrow, and Mercury will move into Aries at that point. And Aries is the sign that has to do with innovation. It has to do with new things popping up, with courage, and with going, blasting a new path for ourselves. So this means that I believe that from April 11th on, we will get a lot more information, new information that will help us really understand what is exactly going on with this virus, and how we're needing to deal with it and move with it in a much more conscious way. So far, it's been a very unconscious, murky kind of like connecting with it, right? And more emotional as well. It's been much more emotional too.
Well, speaking to the emotions, I've seen a lot of YouTubers who were used to be friends who are now, fighting against each other. No, this is what's going on. No, I'm telling you, this is what's going on. And so a lot of it is sentiment, emotionally based, as opposed to the evidence-based, research. And I hope that this alignment can bring us back to let's get to the facts here, and then get together and work and find the solutions and implement them, and not only survive but thrive. That's the whole point of this
I mean,
series.
that's the whole goal, right? It
Right.
might take a while. I mean, I think that um, the way I see it in terms of the way the planets are, that I think by mid-May, we're going to experience a big shift. But I do think that this is definitely sort of going to be an ongoing, ongoing issue. It might take as long as until the end of the year for us to really understand completely how to, navigate the new waters.
Right.
But we will definitely see a shift already starting mid-May.
So why don't we transition into that then? We had written down
Yeah,
a few topics here for the audience to
yeah,
discuss. So without getting into the longer transition of the Age of Aquarius, what do you
yeah.
see as alignments? So now there's an alignment coming up that'll give us maybe more clarity, more action, more focus. But what's happening in the next couple of months too that might sway or move the environment here on the ground in terms of the virus, but in terms of uh, also the virus, like we need to talk about it, but also for people, because again, I'm all about that self mastery and getting connected and being responsible for self and all that. So can you paint the picture maybe for the next 3-6 months so people are aware what's coming up?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think will create a lot of shift will be the month of May, because in May we're experiencing a lot of retrograde phases. There are a lot of planets that will change direction. And when a planet changes directions, there's two things that happen. One is the planet will be exalted for a period of time, which makes it stronger. So we will see things and become aware of things that we haven't previously been aware of. It's starting this month already to a certain degree with Pluto going retrograde at the end of the month. And so Pluto is already stationing right now. And so what's in our face right now is all the dysfunctions and all the things that are not working for us any longer, whether that's at home or whether that's at work or whether that's, sexually speaking in our world with ourselves or with other people. There's a lot of deep, dark stuff that's currently coming up that we're experiencing, that things that need to be addressed that have been in the background for a long time. Also in connection with, the economy and with governments and things like that. I mean, it's basically Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. But since this is now exalted this month, there's a lot of stuff that's coming to the forefront that feels very intense and that feels something that we need to be dealing with. And when the planet goes retrograde, when it shifts direction, that's a turning point again where we're turning within, and then we're getting to a point of looking to see, okay, how can I realign myself? Whenever planets go retrograde, it is actually sort of like it's like yin and yang. You could look at it as yin and yang. When they're direct, they're in a yang movement where it's like, just going straight forward and moving, it's like a more of an active thing. When they're going retrograde, there's an internal movement, which is more yin, which is more like this feminine, like needing to go inwards and needing to realign ourselves with the outside world. So we're going to be experiencing that on an individual and on a collective level. But in the month of May, there is literally I think there's Saturn, Venus, Jupiter. I think there's three planets that are going retrograde and stationing. And then Pluto will still be stationing as well, even though it goes retrograde in the end of April. So there's 4 planets that we're going to be feeling it very intensely. And they're shifting gear, they're shifting inward. So there's definitely something that there's a turning point in the month of May, I would say, and it will give us sort of it invites us to really shift our thinking and shift our perspective on things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I had an interview a couple of weeks ago with Penny Kelly. She was the author of the book The Robes, and in the interview she spoke of Kundalini Awakening,
Yes.
how to use sexual energy, orgasm to achieve higher enlightenment and to heal the body, etc. And my email blew up. People were like, give us more of that information. So that what you're talking about now, is that a precursor to why this energy is so, like, I thought nobody would want to hear that, but I had a lot of response from it. And maybe one, what's the alignment pushing towards that? And two, how do we use that energy to propel ourselves, to empower ourselves? What would be the advice you can give to people to try to use and like you say, align with these new planet movements so that we can
Well, it's very much about that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that I mentioned earlier that will happen 3 times this year. It happened in April already. It's happening again in the end of June, and it happens again in the middle of November.
Okay.
And that alignment has a lot to do with our needing to take a new perspective on this higher process, our soul process, in regards to letting go of the old and stepping in a more empowered place. And if you think about an orgasm, right? An orgasm is a letting go, right? And it's you feel completely empowered afterwards, right? You're letting something go and you feel empowered, you feel great, right? And you feel very passionate about life and yourself, and maybe also the partner that you're having this orgasm with. So Pluto is that force. Pluto is, but it happens on a soul level. It's not necessarily on a personal level, but through our individual connection to letting go and stepping more into a passionate place with life, we are connecting to that Plutonian energy. We're connecting to that energy of like transforming our lives on a much larger scale and stepping more into a experience that that serves us on a soul level, because Pluto is also connected with soul purpose. And of course, soul purpose means that it has to be something that you feel passionate about. Soul purpose always means that you give your heart and soul to it, right? Because you love it so much. I mean, that's Pluto is like all or nothing, right? It's like this, it's either completely disempowering or it's completely empowering. There's nothing in between. And that the empowerment happens when we can really feel this calling on a soul level and on a heart-centered level of like, I'm giving all of me to something, right? That's Pluto. And an orgasm is that, right? I mean, an orgasm is you giving yourself fully and completely to something, you're letting go of control, and you're feeling like $1 million afterwards, right? So it's that process, right, that we're experiencing on a physical level is something that we now need to tap into on a spiritual and on a soul level as well. Because on the physical level, it's, you know, it's wonderful and it does something for us, but it stays on a physical level, right? What we're really needing to do is connect the dots, connect the dots from the physical to the emotional, to the spiritual, to the, to the energetic, and of course the mental is somewhere in there as well, right. But to really connect the dots and create this bigger experience in life for ourselves.
Well, there you go, folks. You just heard it. This is the right timing to use that energy for yourself and to achieve new heights that maybe you haven't achieved before. And also with the clarity that's coming, to really review maybe the relationships that you're in, whether sexual or not, but to really see how, and if they work for you, and if they don't, to empower yourself to make the decisions now and the changes that you need. Yes. for yourself.
And in the month of May, we'll also have a Venus retrograde, and Venus, of course, has to do with relationships as well. So We're getting a chance to review. That's another thing that a retrograde phase does. It helps you to review where you're at with something and to see if the inner world it matches up with the outer world. And that's what retrograde phases provide for us. It gives us this reconnecting on a more honest level, And so, everything that we're going to be experiencing, coming forth for the next, 6 weeks or so is going to be very much a needing to take a look at what do we need to realign ourselves with? what is the inner saying, that what's the outer and the inner, where's the disconnect, where are the disconnects, and how can we realign?
What would you give as advice for people to get grounded and to make space for that process to happen? What would you say to those people who are just
Obviously
picking up to this?
there's so many ways in which we can engage in this process, but one thing I think that's really important is to make sure that you have a healthy connection with yourself, right? That you learn how to tune in, right? And tuning in means that you really allow the outside world to fall away and to really fully get in touch with what's going on inside of you, whether that's on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a physical level, on a spiritual level, whatever level that is, all of them preferably. And to see, you can do this via meditation, you can do this via breathing exercises. You can do this by taking walks in nature by yourself. You can do this by just, taking pauses where you allow yourself to just drop into your body and go, like, just let everything else fade away. Almost like when a movie ends, you've been watching a movie and all of a sudden the movie ends and the credits are running and then all of a sudden the movie screen goes black.
Yeah.
You do that with yourself. You close your eyes and you just allow the movie to stop and go black. And it just create silence and peace within yourself. Go beyond the thinking, go beyond the mind, because the mind, not that the mind is not valuable, the mind is a wonderful tool, but it distracts us very often. The mind takes us into the past. The mind takes us into the future. The mind has us go round and round in all these different places, but it doesn't create stillness. And stillness is the very thing we need right now in order to be able to hear other voices, not just the mental chatter, like we call it the monkey mind, right? The monkey chatter, but that we can actually listen to something that's quieter and more subtle, which is our intuitive voice, which is our knowing, because there's so much knowing in each one of us already there. We don't need to ask the media what's going on. There's a knowing inside each one of us, in each of our cells. Every cell of the body has a knowingness. Yeah. Every cell of the body is actually a replica of the whole universe. So you could say that the universe is inside of us 1,000-fold, right? Each cell of the body is the universe. So, if that is true, then everything you need to know. Everything's already there. So the stillness and the tuning in provides a connection to that, a connection to the body, a connection to the intuition, and to something that's takes us deeper, that takes us to a much more truthful place, to a much more authentic place. So I would recommend that.
Very good. And following on that, in doing this type of work with people one-on-one over the years, I found that when people first do that and get into that quiet space and they eliminate all that chatter and they get centered, they often find, and they come back to me and say, Jean-Claude, I finally looked at it. I'm like, what did you look at? Like, my core wound, that thing that scares me to shit, or that's, that thing that hurts me, or the pain or the fear and all that. What do I do with it? And I always say, well, go right through it. That's the door, right? So what do you see now happening maybe in alignments that could also support people from going through that crucible of whatever it is, like past karmic debt, pain, how do you call it, like trauma, all these things, like right. What's happening now that might support that also, and that
there's
process?
Definitely a lot of that going on, I would say. I mean, it is important to it's a difficult question because everyone's going to deal with this very differently, right?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I'm always someone who says, do what you can for yourself, but also let other people help you, let other people contribute to you, right? Because the truth is, yes, self-responsibility is important, and knowing to focus on yourself is very important, but but we're not alone in the world. We live, you know, with a billion people. So it is important to let that come through, you know, to let these connections that we're having with other people come through and allow ourselves to be supported by others. Because one thing that I've noticed is that people love supporting other people. You know, it gives each person such a boost. You know, when you can help someone, you can support someone, it makes you feel better about yourself, right? And not to say that you shouldn't help yourself, right? It's sort of like it's a balancing act, right? It's a yin and a yang thing. It's like allow yourself to tune in and do what you need to do for yourself, but also allow other people to contribute to you and allow other people to help you. And I think that the way the planets are currently, there is a need for that balance, right? There's a need for the balance of self-responsibility versus allowing to receive nurturing, allowing to receive this connection with other people. And the way we can work through our emotional stuff is by, you know, by letting it out, by letting it be there, by letting other people see it.
By speaking your truth.
Sorry, yes?
By speaking your truth.
Yes, by speaking your truth. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to hear your truth, right? I mean, it depends on how comfortable you are with sharing yourself, right? But it just means that, you know, let other people see that you're not perfect. Let other people see that you're human. I mean, the one thing that we all have in common is the human journey, right? That we're all spirits in a human body. And we all have that in common. And to let ourselves allow to be human and let that be seen, you know, that other people can see that humanity. You know, I mean, I talk a lot in my forecasting forums or my videos that I do. I very often mention, you know, what's going on with me and how I'm feeling or what's not okay for me, you know, or the difficulties or the challenges that I'm having. And I'm doing that not to you know, talk about myself. I do that only because I want people to understand that I am exactly like everybody else. I'm human. I go through stuff. I experience ups and downs. I have emotional, you know, things that come up that feel really huge and that I feel like I can't deal with. And then I realize how strong I am and how I can move through things. So there's these waves that we're all experiencing all the time, and that's human. It's normal. It's what we all share in the end, right? And allowing ourselves to let each other know that we are that is very comforting to the rest of us, right? It's comforting to know that everybody goes through this stuff.
That,
right?
And when you're authentic like that and you let yourself be authentic, you're letting other people be authentic. That's when magic happens. Because like you said, we're all in here on the same boat. We're all here learning. And I just find that I said speaking your truth earlier, and it didn't mean like being, you know, not respectful to people, but it just meaning shining, be your authentic self and letting other people do that. Really, universe rewards that. And that's, at first it's, you know, if you have abilities or gifts or you're shy about something, it's hard to get out there. But once you're there, you see, oh my God, all the healing, the transformation that can happen, it far outweighs any angst you might have of not sharing who you are and all that. So I really recommend the folks who are listening to this interview to try it out, because, and especially now, I think the time and the alignments are supportive of that energy. So please.
And one other thing I want to say about fear is that, you know, it's important to acknowledge our own fears. It's important to allow ourselves to have those feelings. It's not about not having fear, because we all do right now, you know, because this is a time of uncertainty. This is a time where we don't know what's going to unfold. And so it's human to have fear. So it's important not to ignore that. But at the same time, we don't want to empower the fear by adding to it, by, you know, engaging in things that create more fear in us, right? So one thing I really recommend with fear is acknowledge that you're scared, and then do things that are either self-soothing or that feel comforting to you, that feel like things that can open your heart again. Because the thing with fear is the fear closes us off. Yeah. It puts us in a place of being protected, you know, puts up a wall. The best way to counteract fear is through acknowledgement and through reminding ourselves that we need to reopen our hearts. And the moment you go into a place of opening your heart, the fear actually will subside. And it's not a process of negating the fear, not saying I don't have fear, I'm only open-hearted. It's not that. It's really literally saying like, yes, I'm scared, and I also want to open myself up to love. And the moment you open yourself up to love, you will find that the fear will start to fizzle away.
Awesome.
So that's important too, I think.
Very, very wise words. Thank you. Sonja, do you know, or do you see any loose cannons, I don't know how else to call it, but intruders that might pop in here astrologically to shake up things? Is there an asteroid, a Chiron, a black moon Lilith somewhere, you know, is it going to pop its head and shake us up? And maybe we can give a little bit of a forewarning to the folks who are listening to this.
Well, I mean, obviously there's always going to be, with astrology, there's always going to be things that will shake things up a little bit, because that's the nature of the planets, especially the outer planets. The nature of the outer planets is to shake things up, because if they weren't there to do that, we would never change. We would never evolve. Right. So the job of I call them the soul planets in a way, because I think that the outer planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Did I leave anything out? Chiron is sort of like the bridge between the outer planets and the social planets. So we have Jupiter, Saturn, which are the social planets, which create how we interact on a social level in the collective. And then there's Chiron, which is the bridge between the soul planets and the social planets, which tells us how human we are. And then there are the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, which are the planets that are directly connected to our soul essence. And they are the ones that shake things up, because they need to, so that we can evolve on a human level. We can go to the next place. And of course, they're around all the time. So yes, I mean, right now, this year obviously is more of a shakeup, because Pluto is involved in a big way, which is a big soul planet, a big outer planet. Even though it's a small, tiny planet in the universe, it has a lot of force. It has a lot of energy to it. And that being connected to Saturn and to Jupiter, which are the social planets, is what's creating this shakeup of our society, right? It's creating the shakeup on a very collective level. And then, you know, when Jupiter and Saturn come together at the end of the year, that will be more of a social renewal. You know, we're going to be renew on a social level, on a social collective level, and move more towards the age of Aquarius, you know, move more towards a more empowered vision for humanity, you know, like learning how to create a collective that can interact on an equal footing with each other, where people can support each other, where people can be there for each other, where we can, and look, I'm not wanting to paint like a utopia here, because it all sounds maybe too good to be true, right? It's a process. I want to remind people it's a process. We're seeding something at the end of the year. And it's a process and a vision and the path for us to get to that place. It's not something that will happen overnight, because nothing does in evolution, right? I mean, if you think about history, you know, things happen in increments, you know, things happen in 10, 20 year cycles, right? And the same is still true for us now. It's just that I think more and more people are waking up, and more people are engaging in that collective process. And I think that's also what we're experiencing in 2020, is this, that more people want to be engaged in that collective process rather than asleep. And in a way, we don't have much choice, right? I mean, the way things are, we have to sort of engage on some level, right?
Right. Is it fair to say also that because we're moving into this new age of Aquarius, that the choices we make now in this incarnation as souls are maybe a little bit more important than in the last couple of reincarnations, seeing as we're setting up maybe for a huge cycle. Do you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, I personally, I believe that every choice that you make in this current incarnation that you're in influences future incarnations, always.
Yeah.
And I also think that past decisions that you've made in past incarnations have influenced your current incarnation, right? And that's also why we have karmic stuff that we need to work through sometimes in our current life. Although I do believe that most karmic things get resolved in the beginning of your life, right? So during your childhood or young adult life, because that's the time, your childhood is the time where you have the least control over what's going to happen to you, right? Because you're thrown into a family, you're thrown into a situation, and you got to deal, right? And that's when a lot of karmic stuff gets resolved, because you're choosing to connect to people that you have karma with. You're choosing to engage in certain things that need to be resolved for you on a soul level. And so I think once you get to the second half of your life, you usually, most people have burned off most of their karma from past lives at that point, unless there's something really heavy-handed that they're not able to let go of. Okay. But, you know, people can also work with hypnotherapists and with deep therapy, with EMDR or things like that, where they can actually resolve issues like that if they haven't been able to do that in the second half of their life yet, I believe. I mean, I've done so. I've done a lot of work in that regard.
Okay.
So,
and in terms of setting the tone for this new age.
Yes, in terms of setting the tone for the new age, I would say yes. Every thought that you have, every action that you take, every every interaction that you have with yourself or with other people is always a seeding. It's always a seeding of something that can sprout at some point in the future. You know, nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing. You know, so everything has consequences, but everything also has rewards, right? So whatever it is that you're seeding in this now moment, it is a part of your future already, because the now moment is always the seed for the future, right? And I always say to my clients, you know, being present in the now moment is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself, because the now moment is your greatest place of empowerment. This is where you make choices. The now moment is where you make choices for your future. The now moment is where you create empowerment for the future. It's not in thinking about the future that you create empowerment. It's not about in your imagination about the future that you feel empowered all of a sudden, although maybe you could, but it's the now moment, you know, being present with yourself, with your physical self, with your emotional self, with your spiritual self. That is where the power is. And that's something we have to learn to do on a collective level, you know, because most of us are not trained to do that. Most of us are not conditioned to be present, right? I mean, it's not something we learn in childhood, let's face it, right?
No, and the system that we have now too, the nanny state really takes power away, or we give power to it and we expect it to make decisions for us. So what Sonja is saying here is very important. And again, it's about this series of self-mastery and getting within and making those decisions for ourselves and really getting that to that inner knowing. I love what you just answered, because for a lot of people, that's a lot of clarity that they've been looking for a long time. So I really thank you for that. Well, you reminded me of something else that we didn't have on the topic list. And so if you'll indulge me, I have another question for you. Sure. You kept mentioning the yin and the yang. And to me, as you were talking, I was getting this vision of the role of the divine feminine and the divine masculine and all these changes. And to me, what I see is this whole, the old system or the old guard that's going down now, that's crumbling with these energies. It's being run by the masculine or the patriarchy system, but it's also being run by the wounded male, right? You have to be honest. So what's the role now of the divine feminine to maybe help with that wounded male, to help herself, and then also help that wounded male to create the new structures that are going to lead us into the Age of Aquarius? How do you see that?
Well, I think this has been a process we've been undergoing probably since 2012, that the divine feminine has started to be more at the forefront, or has gotten more attention. And I do believe that the divine feminine is something that has been suppressed for a really, really long time, you know, and we're just now starting to see how that's really been impacting us on a collective level. And the thing with the divine feminine is it's very important to understand that we need both. We need the divine feminine and we need the divine masculine. There is no separation between the two. Right. One cannot be without the other. They're really, they come in tandem, right? They need each other, because the feminine is about receiving and going within and kind of connecting to a softer part of ourselves, right? Whereas the divine masculine is about, you know, going outwards and taking action and doing things that in service of the divine feminine, or in collaboration with the divine feminine, that brings us further into the next place, right? So we do need both, and that's why it's so important for people to allow themselves to explore, men and women, to explore the divine feminine and the divine masculine in unison, you know, to explore that tandem, to explore that connection in a healthy way, you know, because there's nothing wrong with the masculine. It's just that the way we've been suppressing the feminine has made the masculine too overpowering. It has made it too dominant. And so when something becomes dominant, it means that there is a, you know, whenever something becomes too overemphasized, it becomes a weakness.
Right. It's out of balance.
It's out of balance. Exactly. So it's not that it's bad. It's just out of balance. It's become a weakness for us as humans to be so in the masculine. Right. And I mean, I remember in childhood, you know, growing up, that, you know, everything was about accomplishing and doing and, you know, moving forward. And, you know, everything was about the masculine. And, you know, I'm a very feminine person, energetically speaking. You know, I have Venus rules my chart. I'm a Taurus, I have Libra, and I have, you know, all these feminine energies in my chart. And I felt very, as a child growing up, it was very jarring for me at times, you know, like all this masculine energy, but I had to adapt, right? I had to adapt into the masculine because I couldn't survive otherwise. So I had to learn. And I think a lot of women can relate to this, you know, that as a woman, you know, even if you have a lot of feminine, beautiful feminine energy inside of you, growing up, you had to adapt yourself into this masculine energy so that you could be part of society and be part of, you know, something, you know, that you could be seen and heard. And, you know, if you were only in your feminine, you would be just brushed aside, right?
Yeah.
So I think that as women, I think it's important to learn how to rejoin our feminine again, you know, because I think we've lost contact, you know, we've lost this beautiful connection to our own feminine. And I think the men in the world need to learn how to allow the feminine to shine through them, because the men have just as much feminine energy as women do, right? I mean, there are variations, right, in terms of like masculine and feminine inside you, but everyone has both. It's just there, you know, we all have it. So for men, it's important to not see feminine as a weakness, you know, but to see it as something that needs to be connected with, so that there can be a much stronger masculine. Because masculine gains in strength by connecting to the feminine, not by disconnecting.
Exactly.
Right.
Wow, beautifully said. Sorry, I put you on the spot with that one, but you did really well.
That was wonderful questions. I'm so glad you asked it, because it is so much it's so much part of the process actually that we're in currently, because, you know, Capricorn is a feminine energy, and with all these planets in Capricorn, there's definitely been an invitation to connect more to the feminine, you know.
Right.
And especially also with the outer planets, you know, Neptune is in Pisces, which is very feminine. I mean, it's like It's like feeling and emotion, you know. Pluto in Capricorn, feminine energy. You know, both of these planets have been in these feminine signs since, what is it, 2011, I think, and the other one, 2008. Pluto in Capricorn 2008, Neptune in Pisces, I think 2011 or 2012. So you can see since then, we've really had to, as a collective, step more into our feminine, right? And Uranus has just moved into Taurus last year. So that is now also in a feminine sign, Taurus, right? So we have 3 outer planets, 3 soul planets that are all currently in feminine signs. So what does that tell you? Our soul is just screaming to us right now. Connect to the divine feminine. Allow the divine feminine to source you, you know, not to be ignored.
For the woman, what does she do to let that process happen? And for the man, what does he do to let that process happen?
That's a fantastic question. And obviously everyone will kind of move with that slightly differently. But I think for me personally, it's been a connecting to my emotional body in a more authentic way, in a more forgiving way, allowing myself to be human and allowing myself to really tune into the parts of myself that are fragile and that are sensitive and that are, you know, that are vulnerable, right? And which is, you know, probably a scary process for most human beings, you know, men and women. But, you know, when you grow up in a way where you're being pushed into the masculine but you know that there's a lot of feminine, going back to that feminine can be very scary. You know, it can be very scary to allow that to be a part of you and to see it as a beautiful part of yourself. Because I used to view my emotions as something that is weakness and that is bad, you know, because growing up, that's how I experienced it, because I was always told as a child that if I cry, that, you know, I need to stop crying because otherwise I'll get a reason to cry for, you know. So it was a very, you know, having any sort of emotion was just not acceptable. And so going into the divine feminine, we have to first heal. We have to first heal the parts of ourselves. And I think this is true for men and women. You know, we have to heal the parts of ourselves that have been injured in that process, you know, that have been, you know, where we've been told this is not okay for you to be sensitive. It's not okay for you to have emotions. It's not okay for you to cry. It's not okay for you to, you know, have a certain feeling. Right? I mean, as women, sometimes we're called hysterical when we have an emotion come up, right? That's very strong and very powerful. And the thing is, it's important to, you know, whether society is ready to embrace that or not is another question. But on an individual level, we need to be ready to embrace ourselves fully, whether that's being judged by other people or not. And that's a personal process, right? And I think it's true for men too. You know, men, of course, have a much harder time with connecting to their feeling body often. But I do believe that there is much more of an acceptance around the feeling body with newer generations,
right?
With younger people. And I do feel that especially men that have children can really take a lot of learning from their own children, from their own offspring. You know, I think it's important to look at the younger generations and see how do younger people deal with their feelings, you know, how, and you know, younger people don't think of themselves as not masculine enough if they're having a feeling, whereas older generations might do feel that very much so. So I think it's important for us to open our hearts to taking the lessons from people that are doing the process and that feel comfortable in that way, and going like, well, how can I get more comfortable in that way as well, learning from other people's examples, right? Letting ourselves be inspired, you know, by other people's examples.
Wow. Again, guys, rewind 5 minutes and listen to that one more time. That was amazing, Sonja. Now, before I get into
Yeah.
your online services, your websites, and
Yeah.
your addresses, is there anything else that we went through all the topic list, but as we were talking, is there anything else that maybe universe is guiding you to put out there that needs to be said or heard?
Good question. Let me check. Well, maybe one thing that I would still want to say is talk about Chiron and Aries, which we just started to work with a year ago. Chiron is the wounded healer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the part of ourselves that connects the spiritual with the human, with the physical, right? The physical and the spiritual get connected in Chiron, and it's in a way it's the wound of being human, in a sense, right? Because we are spirit beings, and on some level we know that we're spirit beings, but we might not always be conscious of that. And Chiron is the part of ourselves that understands the connection between being human and being spirit. And it's the part of us where we need to really learn how to heal that separation that we're experiencing in the human body, because in the human condition we often feel separate from our spiritual selves.
Mm-hmm.
And Chiron gives us the key to that connection. How can we connect the human experience with the spiritual experience, right? Or with the spiritual body. And Chiron is in Aries until, let's see, 2026, I think. Because it just started, it's a 7-year cycle, and it just started last year. So basically, Chiron and Aries has to do with the wounded masculine, right? So it's very much about, this cycle is giving us permission to take a look at the masculine energies in us, and to look to see how can we bring a more complete experience to the masculine. How can we bring a more holistic experience to the masculine, rather than having it be something that dominates? How can we make it the divine masculine?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make it this spiritual experience in the masculine, rather than this, this place of violence, or this place of doom, or suppression, or all the other things that are currently going on with the masculine energies,
Control,
right?
domination, all that
Control,
stuff.
domination, etc., exactly. So this is a process. Again, it's a process, and we have to remember that with astrology, a lot of these things are processes, and so we have to trust that these processes are happening to each one of us in a particular way, and we're all experiencing it slightly differently, but it all has to do with engaging with the masculine on a more healthy level. Mm-hmm. And one ways we can engage with the healthy masculine is to identify ourselves as human, rather than as, I have to be superhuman, I have to be on top of the world, I have to have all the power, right? Identify yourself as human, and as a spirit being in human form. The other thing is to engage with the masculine in a way that includes parts of yourselves that you don't feel so good about, right? Because the masculine, there are sides of ourselves that we don't feel good about with the masculine. For example, our anger, right? Anger is a big one with the masculine, because it's a very immediate way to experience the masculine, right? Anger or violence. And when we engage with anger or violence in a kinder way, in a way where we can forgive, in a way where we can be compassionate with ourselves. And each one of us, of course, has to do that process individually speaking. But the moment you can start to meet the masculine from a kinder place, from a place of not condemning it, but accepting it, embracing it, connecting with it, that's when it will transform into a much healthier masculine, and into a more divine masculine, so to speak, right? Like, for example, if we think about martial arts, right? If you think about martial arts is a very masculine sport, right? But martial arts really incorporates divine masculine, because it's very much about engaging in a way where we're engaging not just on a physical level, we're also engaging on a spiritual and emotional and mental level. Yeah. So we're really approaching something on a very holistic level. And so therefore martial arts is a really great example for Chiron and Aries, right? It's like, how do I live out my masculine in a healthy, holistic way? And not to say that everybody should now pick up martial arts, of course not. But I'm just giving it as an example to kind of see it as something that is approached from a holistic level. And we can do that as we interact and as we contribute and as we do things in life, to not just approach it from a physical place, or not just approach it from a mental place, but approach it really in a more holistic way.
It's funny you say that, because the first video in this series was with another martial artist, and we were talking about just that whole mind connection, and how you reach balance when you're looking at the big picture of humanity and who we are. And so and you can see my friend Bob in the back there. That's one of our martial arts dummies that we play with, and the kids love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. That was great. And well, let's get into some of your services now. I've known you for some time. You do the your natal charts, you do the readings, you do the personal coachings and all that. Can you get into how people can reach you? Where's the best place to book your services? And also,
one of the things I would say, that since right now we're in a time where maybe not everybody can afford a reading right now, because maybe resources might be tight a little bit, the really best way to connect with me and to engage with me is either through my social media, which is I have a Facebook fan page, which is called AstrologerCoach.SonjaFrancis. I have a Twitter page, which is Sonja Francis. I have an Instagram page, which is Astrologer Coach. I have a YouTube channel, which is also Astrologer Coach. And then I also have a membership site that I offer currently. And the reason for the membership site is so that people can really engage on a daily basis with what the energies are doing currently, so that you can start to align yourself with what's going on every day. And by doing so, you can be more present. And by being more present, you can start to feel more empowered in your own doing and being. And so I highly recommend, looking into that. There are different levels of membership that you can engage with, depending on what works for you at this time. But if you do want to get a reading, or if you do want to do a coaching session, of course, that's also available. Everything is available on my website at astrologercoach.com. And I also do monthly forecasting forums that are for free for my star members. And you can just join them once a month if you ever want to check them out. They're $37 to join the webinar, and they're usually 90 minutes or longer. But it is a great way also to understand a little bit better what's going on every month and how to prepare for the month. And not just how to prepare for the month, but what we also do in these forums is we will look at our own birth charts. Everyone has their birth chart in front of them, and I will guide people to see how this is impacting each person in terms of their own birth chart, what the energies are doing and how things are unfolding. Right. And so that's really valuable too, I think. So there are multiple ways. I also offer soul-based astrology courses online. So if people want to connect, want to understand or learn more about astrology and about their own chart and do it themselves, that's also available. And I also do tutoring sessions with my students. So anybody who is a soul-based astrology student gets tutoring sessions available, and they're very inexpensive. So that way I can guide you and support you throughout your studies that you're doing online with me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sonja, for your time and your energy today. I really appreciate it. I really love this conversation. There's so many other places I would go with it, but
fun. I had no idea we were going to have such a long conversation, but this is wonderful.
Yeah, no, really super appreciative that you said yes to the interview. And so far, I mean, universe is providing, and it's like there's a guide in hand, putting everybody together in unison, and I could just feel the movement and the energy going forward, and that's really what I wanted to concentrate on this video series. And man, you hit it out of the park today. So thank you so much, Sonja. And for everyone at YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you like the work we're doing here, that really helps out. Go like and subscribe. Sonja's YouTube channel as well, Astrologer Coach on YouTube. And but more than that, please share this video. You all know people in your families right now, or your loved ones, or your entourage, who are looking for information and who are what's the word? They're yearning for some of this deep knowledge and this deep connection, and the frequency that Sonja used today, and a lot of her delivery is so impactful. So share this video with that person and let them get more of that calm inner connection with themselves, so that they can empower themselves and move forward. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Sonja, again, for being here today. And I'm Jean-Claude from Beyond Mystic. You can see me at Beyond Mystic on Twitter and also on Patreon. Have a good day, everyone. Au revoir.
Au revoir.